Warning: tube amplifiers have lethal voltages inside them. Please do not attempt to build, test, or repair these without understanding and following all safety protocols. Hey y'all! Well, we're back for more KT88 building. Kind of explained in the last video what we're doing with this whole build, so I'm not going to talk about that again. We're going to work on the driver tube wiring layout. I'm going to show you how the heater wiring's all laid out. We're going to finish up the power supply, and then I'm going to go over how I'm going to lay out the output tube tag strips, and that's probably going to finish up another video. I'm trying to split this up into digestible segments. And so let's get busy building this amp. Okay, so let me show you how I am wiring up the front end tube and the power supply and the front end part of the output tube. So let's go ahead and start with the resistors on the output tubes. We're going from pin 6 to pin 4, which is the screen, with a 1.2K screen stopper, like this. Pin 6 isn't used on this tube, and we're using it as a tag point for this resistor to go across. And then eventually we're going to pull this screen tap off the output transformer and run it like that over to pin 6 and connect the screen up to the screen tap on the output transformer. So this is the plate of the output tube, and that means the plate lead from the output transformer is going to come over and go to that pin. So then we have the two heaters here, which we haven't connected yet, and this is the cathode that's going to be connected up to the cathode resistor and bypass cap, and we haven't figured that part out yet, but that covers the output tube wiring. As you can see, we're wiring up everything symmetrical. I mean, in the past I've done kind of mirror connecting the tubes, but this time I decided to do the tag strips and the resistors and stuff symmetrically. So this is the grid stopper, which is a 1.2K resistor, and this will be our grid tag point on the strip. Same over here. And then we have a grid leak resistor, which is 240K, that goes from this pin to this pin. That's this little resistor underneath here. And this is going to be the ground point of the output tube tag strip. We're also using this tag strip as the power supply filter for the driver tube, which you always have to have a RC connection or filter between the main B plus and the input tube to isolate the driver tube from the output tube, so you don't end up with the amp motor boating or doing weird stuff. And so that's what this resistor here is. It's a 3.3K. It goes between these two terminals. And then the plate load resistor is this resistor right here, which is a 39K. As you can see, it's a little short guy here. Then on this side, we had to run the resistor all the way across over to this terminal here. And it was just long enough to reach, and put some PTFE tubing on it to keep it from potentially shorting out to anything. So eventually this is going to be where the B plus connects. We'll run a jumper from here to here. I mean, I left some of this out so you can see these resistors for now. So it'll go from here to here. And then this will be the ground. And it's going to like circle around and come around to the ground for the output tube section. I'm going to keep the ground for this tag strip separate from the ground on this tag strip, because this is where the signal ground and the high sensitive driver tube will ground. So let's go over what's going on this tag strip. So we have our plate load resistor that's powering up this terminal. and this goes to our plate. And then we have these two 510 ohm resistors that are going to the suppressor grid and the screen grid. So both of those are tied to the plate with separate resistors, 510 ohms, that triode straps the two. So we've done the same thing over here. So this is our cathode terminal. We have a 200 ohm resistor that goes from here to here. And then in a little while, when we start finishing up the main wiring here, we'll put our cathode LED from here to here. And this is going to be our front end ground terminal. And again, the power comes in through this plate load resistor. This one, and then this one over here. So this is going to be the ground terminal, and we're going to connect this terminal to this terminal with a wire, and then this is going to go over to the ground over on the capacitor in the front of the amp, which I'll show you in a second. So here we have the grid stopper for this input tube. It's a 2K resistor. It goes from the grid pin up to this terminal. Same over here, grid pin to the terminal. And then this is our grid leak resistor, which also sets the input impedance of the amp, given that we have no volume control. And again, we're using a 240K resistor, just like we used on the output tube for its grid leak resistor. So when we get ready to hook up the shielded input wire, it's going to hook across these two pins here. This will be the signal. This is the ground that goes around and up to the RCA connectors up in the back of the amp. Same over here. And this will come across like this and up to the front of the amp. And then these are our heater wires, which we haven't connected up obviously yet. And they'll go down, up, connect these two, come up and go around and connect up to the heaters. So let me zoom out here. So when I'm connecting this ground terminal here on the front end of the amp, we're going to come over here and tie it to this ground terminal, which is the terminal that both of these filter caps ground to. And then this will have a jumper ground that goes from here up here to the star ground point in the back of the amp. And that way, this front end section and the signal ground will be tied to this ground up here where the main filter caps all ground. And then in the back of this output tube area, I'm going to put some tag strips, probably like this and this. I may put one across here. I haven't decided exactly yet how I'm going to do this part, but we'll pull a ground that'll come from here, and that's the LED wiring that we need to connect to here once we get the heater wires done. We're going to run a ground that's going to come around here away from these heaters. It's going to come back here to ground these cathode resistors that are on top of the amp. And then it will also connect this ground point and this ground point to the same ground point that the cathode resistors are grounded in this area, and then pull that ground over here to the star ground point. And that way, this filtering and the cathode resistor ground will be separate from the ground for the front end tubes and the signal path coming into the amp, which may or may not be necessary, but I just think it's a good idea to keep those separate. So the next thing I'm probably going to do is go ahead and wire up the heaters. One pair is going to come down here, go to this tube, and then to this tube, and then these two heaters are going to be daisy chained together and then come across and run up like that. And that way it keeps all the heaters away from the signal. So let me get the heaters all wired up, and once I get the heaters wired up, I can connect up the little bridge rectifier and the capacitor that I use for the indicator LED, and then start looking at how I'm going to connect up the cathode resistors and bypass caps and the grounding that's going to be used for these tubes and this strip, and then part of this little strip too, there's going to be a 33 UF 500 volt cap that goes from this terminal to the ground, and then from this terminal to the ground, that acts as the filter capacitor for the plate load resistor power supply. And again, I left that off because then you can see like where all these resistors were wired up. So let me get the heaters wired up and figure out how we're going to do the cathode grounding through the resistors, and we'll be ready to power this amp up. Okay, let me show you the little bit of wiring that I finished up since the last segment. We went ahead and put our little bridge rectifier here with a little filtering cap. The size of this isn't very critical. Just stuck a 470 UF 25 volt guy here, but yeah, if you got something else laying around, not a critical value. Again, it's just for the little indicator LED on the power switch. I put a 3K resistor in here. Gives a nice kind of soft glow to the switch, and then negative, positive. Like I said, there are other ways to do the illuminator, but just kind of showing you how that is wired up. Let me zoom in real quick and just give you a little close-up of that. And I just used some contact cement to glue the top of that cap to the chassis to give this little bridge rectifier a little support, and then use the leads on the cap to kind of hold up this end and solder those two to there. So you can see we got all the heater wiring done. We daisy chain this one to this one, and then these come over, connect up to here, and then we got this pair coming down here, going across, up, kind of tuck this in the corner, helps neutralize the interference coming off of those wires, and twisting them does the same thing. So then we've got this terminal and this terminal are the grounds for these input tube tag strips. So we tied this one to this one, and I dipped it down right here to give me some room to put my coupling cap that's going to go across here. Same thing over here. Coupling cap's going to go from here to there. And if you had some extra large coupling caps, there's like a spot right here that you could put like one of those big MyFlex caps, which I'm not a fan of. Some people love them, but big spot right there, and there's another big spot right here to put an oversized coupling cap if you're into those things. So then we bring this ground up, comes over. It's kind of hard to see, but I go up and over the heater wire here. Same thing with this power lead. It goes up and over. Gotta hump it up so in 3D space, so it gives it a little distance. See if you can kind of see what I did there, like that. And then it comes over and connects to this ground point, which we have the ground from this cap to here, the ground from this cap to here, and then obviously the front end ground goes to here, and then this goes up over to our star ground point right here. And then this right here is our bleeder resistor, which bleeds off these caps when you turn off the power. And it's especially useful if you power up the amp without the tubes in it. This voltage could sit on here for a long time without this bleeder resistor. And I just use a 470K. I know some people use smaller ones. I don't like to load down the power supply too much. So, yeah, don't forget that little guy. So, then we pull the power off of this terminal here because, again, it goes from here through the choke to this terminal, then goes through this resistor to this terminal. So then it comes up here, goes to this tag strip that's on this tube, is the power. This is our dropping resistor, and then also comes over to here, dropping resistor, and there's the plate load resistor. Probably kind of hard to see, but there's a plate load resistor under there too that goes from here to the plate, here to the plate. So that takes care of the front end power and ground and the heaters. So the last thing we've got to do is do the cathode resistors. We got to ground this terminal and this terminal, and we got to power up the output transformers. Now I could run a power wire from here to here, but I'm going to go ahead and pull it from all the way over here. Just to, the little bit of resistance that's in that wire, I want it to have its own wire coming to the output tubes because these are drawing a lot of current. So we're going to run a wire kind of across, up, go up and over, connect to this terminal, and this will be our full B+, and then we can attach that output transformer wire and that output transformer wire to this terminal here, and that'll power up our output transformers. And then before I zoom in to show you that in more detail, this and this are going to be grounds. So we're going to connect this terminal to this terminal with a jumper, and then we're going to have a wire coming from here, probably going to go down this way, and then across over to our star ground point to keep that as far away from these heaters as we can. Then we're going to run a jumper wire from here to there, and from here to there. That establishes our ground point here and here for these two tag strips. Then we're going to put our filtering cap between here and there to create the RC filter for the front end tubes. So finally, we need to do the cathode resistors and bypass caps. And so the cathode, these two pins get tied together. Let me zoom in here, get a little detail. So this pin gets tied to this pin, pins 1 and 8. You don't necessarily have to do it for KT88, but if we were ever going to experiment with EL34s, these two have to be connected together. Same over here. This is going to connect to this terminal, that to that terminal. Then this is going to come up, go through this hole here to the cathode resistor on the top. Same thing with this terminal. It's going to come and go to this hole here, go to the end of the cathode resistor. Then here's the common ground for both of them. It's going to come out and come over to this terminal here, which again has a dedicated ground over to our star ground point. And again, jumps across from here to here to provide the ground for that. And then we can put one cathode bypass cap here, and we'll put another one right there. And that should finish up the wiring for the amp. So let me go do that stuff, and then we'll be ready to power this amp up. So you can see, zipping right along on this little amp. Don't have a whole lot left to do. Just got to finish wiring up the cathode resistors, these guys back here that are up on the top, and then pretty much going to be ready to power this thing up. And in the next video, I'll show you how that wiring is laid out, and then I'll kind of go over the do's and don'ts on powering up a fresh amp. It's one of the things I've never talked about before. Unfortunately, had somebody email me and something went wrong in their build. I don't really understand even what may have happened, but the amp, when they powered it up, it was oscillating. Well, and you could hear it like squealing. Well, he also didn't have anything hooked up to the output jacks, and I think he may have cooked the output transformers. You never want to power up an unknown amp with a signal or even no signal, and the possibility that it could start oscillating or doing something where it's putting a load on the output of the output transformers and there's nothing connected to it. It makes the voltages on the primary side just go sky to the moon. And then you get internal arcing inside the output transformers. There's really no way that I know of to test that that's happened or not. But they'll start blowing fuses. It'll start doing all kinds of weird stuff. So, yeah, we'll go over that in the next video to kind of show you how I power up a fresh amp, and then we'll check all the voltages and all that stuff. Plus, I'll show you how I did the final wiring on the output tubes. So, again, this is probably going to be a pretty short series, maybe just 3 videos, and then, or maybe 4. The final one we'll probably do, some objective testing on it, and then give you some subjective listening to it after looking at it on the audio analyzer suite, just to make sure everything's working like we think it will. And this should be a really low distortion amplifier that, unlike my EL34, isn't designed to have a lot of coloration. It's more, especially in the 3 to 4 watt range, I'm expecting it to be way under 1% distortion, which is a perfect match to the color preamp, which then you can adjust how much harmonic distortion is in the signal path to get the tube sound that you're really looking for. And we'll also test at the end whether it's possible to change out the rectifier tube to be able to use EL34s, which would be a cool feature of this if it does work. But yeah, we'll have to just test it and find out. So anyway, hope you're enjoying this series. If you are, please subscribe to the channel. Please like the video. Thanks for watching, especially people that have subscribed and loyal viewers of my channel. Hope you're enjoying this. Hope you're learning something, even if you're not going to build this amp, about my thought process and how I design and lay out stuff and the reason for it. And thank you for your Patreon supporters. Thanks for you folks that buy amps or commission me to build things. It helps me create content that all of us can enjoy. So until the next video, have a nice day.